The first time Dante Valenti became absolutely certain his wife could not cook, Rosalie Valenti was standing barefoot in their kitchen at 6:13 in the morning, staring at a piece of burned toast as if it had personally betrayed her. Smoke curled lazily toward the ceiling. Rose wore a pale pink robe tied around her soft waist. Her dark hair twisted into a loose knot, and there was a streak of strawberry jam on one finger. The enormous marble kitchen surrounding her contained enough professional equipment to feed a hotel, yet somehow she had lost a fight with a single slice of bread. Dante stopped in the doorway. Rose looked at him. He looked at the toast. She looked at the toast. Neither spoke. Then Dante said, "Should I call the fire department?" Rose narrowed her eyes. "Good morning to you, too. I'm serious. It's toast. Was toast." She picked it up between two fingers. One side was almost entirely black. Dante walked toward the espresso machine. "Please tell me you weren't attempting breakfast." "It was bread." "Dante." "Exactly. Start small." Rose stared at the back of his head with the concentrated hostility of a woman reconsidering several vows she had made 3 months earlier. Marriage to Dante Valenti had taught her many things. His suits were arranged by color, even though he insisted they were all black. He slept on the left side of the bed, but somehow occupied the middle by morning. He took his espresso without sugar. He disliked television during dinner. He remembered every threat made against his family, but routinely forgot his own lunch. And apparently, at 6 in the morning, he was insufferable. Rose dropped the toast into the trash. "For your information, I was on the phone. That explains the destruction. My aunt called. Did she instruct you to burn it?" Rose picked up the butter knife. Dante glanced at it. "Careful." "Why? You've already demonstrated questionable control around kitchen equipment." Rose pointed the knife at him. "One day, Mr. Valenti, you're going to regret being this irritating before coffee." Dante took a slow sip of espresso. "Mrs. Valenti, I have coffee." The corner of Rose's mouth betrayed her. Dante saw it. He always did. 3 months into their marriage, Rose still had not decided whether Dante Valenti was easier or harder to live with than she had expected. Their marriage had been arranged in the old-fashioned language of families that preferred calling strategic agreements traditions. The Bellinis controlled legitimate import businesses Dante needed access to. The Valentis possessed influence Rose's family preferred having beside them rather than opposite them. Meetings occurred. Dinners followed. Rose and Dante were introduced, allowed the polite fiction of choice, and married 6 months later. Dante had never treated her cruelly. That almost made their distance more frustrating. He provided everything before she could ask for it: a driver, an account, security, clothes if she wanted them, staff for anything. She did not. He never told her what to wear, never commented on her soft stomach, thick thighs, or the curves other men sometimes treated as an invitation to offer opinions. When one distant relative had suggested at their wedding that Rose might want to be careful with the cake, Dante had looked at the man and asked, with terrifying calm, whether he wanted to leave using the front door or a window. Rose had liked him enormously for approximately 11 minutes afterward, but Dante solved feelings the same way he solved logistical problems. Rose mentioned being cold once, and 3 new coats appeared in her dressing room. She said she missed a particular pastry from her old neighborhood, and a driver was dispatched 40 minutes across the city. When she told him he worked too much, he hired another assistant. Rose had stared at him for a full minute after that one. "You understand that wasn't what I meant. You said I have too much work." I said I barely see my husband. Dante had looked genuinely confused by the distinction. That was Dante, brilliant at acquiring resources, terrible at recognizing when the requested resource was himself. The cooking misunderstanding had begun during Rose's first week in the mansion. She had walked into the main kitchen one afternoon. rolled up her sleeves, and reached for an onion. Chef Antonio Morelli had reacted as though the new Mrs. Valenti had attempted to perform surgery on his firstborn. No, Rose had blinked. Excuse me, Antonio removed the onion from her hand. Madame, please. I was going to make lunch. I make lunch. I know, but this is my kitchen. He had said it with such wounded dignity that Rose almost apologized to the stove. Antonio was 62, broad as a refrigerator, and had cooked for the Valenti family longer than Dante had been old enough to order anything stronger than milk. Rose respected professionals. More importantly, she understood territorial Italian cooks, so she raised both hands and retreated. From then on, she ate what Antonio prepared, ordered food when she wanted something different, and occasionally survived on cereal when the kitchen had closed. Dante observed all of this and constructed his conclusion. One evening, about a month into their marriage, he had found her eating cereal at midnight. Antonio left lasagna. I know. There is an entire refrigerator. I wanted cereal. Dante sat opposite her. Do you cook? Rose had been reading something on her phone and answered without looking up. Not here. I see. She should have noticed the tone. She did not. The next morning, a new toaster appeared. Rose had assumed the old one was broken. It took her another 2 weeks to realize Dante had bought an appliance specifically because he believed toast represented the upper boundary of his wife's culinary ability. Chef Antonio knew the truth. Rose discovered that when she entered the kitchen later that morning and found him muttering over a pot of tomato sauce, he dipped a spoon, tasted, frowned, added salt, and frowned again. Rose walked past, stopped, walked backward. Antonio pointed the spoon at her. No, I didn't say anything. Your face did. My face is innocent. Your face is criticizing my sauce. Rose leaned toward the pot and inhaled. It needs oregano. Antonio looked personally wounded. It has oregano. Not enough. Mrs. Valenti. Chef Morelli. They stared at each other. Antonio finally held out the spoon. Rose tasted. Oregano. Tiny pinch of sugar. Another 10 minutes. Antonio's eyebrows rose. Sugar. The tomatoes are too acidic. I know how tomatoes work. Then why are you asking my face? He muttered something in Italian that Rose chose to interpret as admiration. 20 minutes later, she passed again. Antonio silently held out another spoon. Rose tasted. Perfect. She nodded. He nodded. Their diplomatic relationship remained intact. Dante saw the exchange from the hall, but arrived too late to understand it. What was that? Rose asked. What was what? You watching me like? I'm stealing state secrets. Antonio does not let anyone taste his sauce. Maybe he likes me. Antonio barely likes God. From behind them, Antonio shouted, God does not touch my knives. Rose smiled sweetly at Dante. See, I rank above God. Dante looked toward the kitchen, then at his wife. A dangerous promotion. He reached past her for the espresso Antonio had left on the counter. Rose noticed the dark circles under his eyes. Have you eaten? I'm having coffee. That was not the question. I have a meeting. Dante. He paused. Something about the way she said his name made even the head of the Valenti organization occasionally. Remember, he had been born with ears. Rose pushed a plate containing 2 pieces of focaccia toward him. Eat. I'm not hungry. Neither was the trash can. But I gave it toast this morning. Life is unfair. He stared at her. Rose stared back. Dante took the focaccia. Happy. Temporarily. It was a small thing. Rose forgot it by noon. Dante did not. People around him wanted money, protection, permission, introductions, territory, forgiveness, revenge. Even his own family tended to approach him with a request already prepared. Rose was the first person in years who regularly demanded that he take something rather than give it. A plate. A coat when it rained. An extra hour of sleep. She did it without ceremony. And because Dante had no useful category for the behavior, he mostly responded by pretending it annoyed him. That afternoon, Rose went with him to one of the Valenti warehouses because Dante had a meeting nearby and she needed the car afterward. She had expected to wait in an office. Instead, the meeting ran late, and she wandered into the loading area where men moved crates beneath fluorescent lights. Nobody ignored her. Being Dante Valenti's wife made invisibility impossible. Some straightened when she passed. Others nodded respectfully. Rose hated when rooms changed shape around her. Near the loading bay, an older driver named Sal Mancuso was struggling with a thermos. His left hand trembled badly enough that coffee splashed onto the lid. Rose stopped. Sal. He looked embarrassed. Mrs. Valenti. When did you eat? I'm fine. That was suspiciously not an answer. Breakfast. Rose looked at the clock. It was almost 4. What kind of breakfast? Cel-Sihil. Coffee. Coffee is a beverage pretending to be a personality. A younger guard nearby laughed. Sal glared at him. Rose opened her handbag. Found the wrapped prosciutto sandwich Antonio had forced on her before leaving the mansion, and handed it over. Eat half. Mrs. Valenti. That's yours. And now it's yours. I'm diabetic. Bread. Rose immediately opened the sandwich, removed half the bread, rearranged the filling, and handed it back, slowly. And stop drinking coffee on an empty stomach unless you want me to tell Antonio. Sal looked alarmed. There's no need for threats. Then eat. Dante had emerged from the office in time to hear the last part. He watched Sal Mancuso, who had once driven through gunfire without changing lanes, obediently take a bite because Rose had told him to. What did you do to him? Dante asked when they reached the car. Fed him. He looked frightened. I mentioned Antonio. Reasonable. Dante opened the door for her himself. A habit Rose pretended not to notice because she liked it. Before she climbed in, she looked back. Sal had finished half the sandwich and was wrapping the rest carefully. He shouldn't be working that long without food. I'll speak to operations. Don't punish anyone. I didn't say I would. Your face did. Dante paused. You've been spending too much time with Antonio. Rose smiled and got into the car. 2 nights later, the Rossi crew hit one of Dante's transport teams. Rose did not learn the details immediately. She knew only that Dante left dinner after receiving a call and did not return. At 11, the mansion became subtly different. Guards moved faster. Radios appeared. The front gate remained closed between arrivals instead of opening automatically. At midnight, Rose found Marco Bellini, no relation to her family despite the surname, standing outside Dante's study with blood on his sleeve. Is that yours? No. Ma'am. Where is Dante handling it? That is an irritating answer. It's the only one I have. At 1:30, vehicles began arriving. Rose watched from the upstairs landing as men entered the foyer in 2s and 3s. Some were angry, some exhausted. One had a bandage around his forearm. Another walked with a limp. Nobody appeared critically wounded, but the atmosphere carried the raw edge of people who had spent hours expecting violence to begin again. Dante entered with the last group. His white shirt was stained at the cuff. Rose came down the stairs. His eyes found her immediately. You should be asleep. Are you hurt? No. She looked at the blood. Not mine. Everyone keeps saying that tonight. Dante glanced toward the men gathering in the hall. Go upstairs. Rose. It was not harsh. If anything, it was protective. That irritated her more. Why? It's late. Very observant. Rose. Dante. They stared at each other until Marco suddenly became fascinated by a painting. Then Rose heard someone's stomach growl. It was absurdly loud. The young man responsible looked mortified. Rose looked around the foyer. 20 men. Perhaps more. When did they eat? Dante frowned. What, your men? When did they eat? I don't know. Marco reluctantly answered. Some had lunch. Rose looked at the clock. 1:47 in the morning. Some. It was a complicated day. Apparently, hunger is part of organized crime now. Dante rubbed his forehead. Rose. I can have food brought in. From where? Anywhere. At 2 in the morning for 20 people, I know people. Yes, Dante. I have gathered that. Rose walked toward the kitchen. Dante followed. The main kitchen was dark. Antonio had left hours earlier. His wife, Teresa, had been admitted to the hospital that afternoon for a scheduled procedure, and Rose knew he would remain with her overnight. The junior staff had finished cleanup and gone home before the attack. Refrigerators hummed behind polished steel doors. Rose switched on the lights. Dante stopped beside the island. I'll call a restaurant. Rose opened the first refrigerator. Don't. Why? She inspected shelves. Tomatoes. Ground beef. Stock. Parmesan. Carrots. Celery. Leftover roasted chicken. Enough eggs to feed a monastery. Fresh bread dough proofing in a covered container. Because by the time 20 meals arrive, half those men will have fallen asleep standing up. Rose. She opened the pantry. Pasta. Beans. Garlic. Canned tomatoes. Olive oil. Good. What are you doing? Thinking. That worries me. Rose ignored him. She removed her earrings and placed them beside the sink. Then, her wedding ring. Dante's gaze dropped to it. Why are you taking that off? Because tomato sauce is not improved by diamonds. She tied her hair up properly, opened Antonio's apron drawer, and chose the largest one. It still barely covered her hips. Dante watched every movement with growing suspicion. Rose. Yes. Step away from the stove. She slowly turned. Excuse me. There are 20 tired men outside. Antonio is unavailable. And this morning you cremated bread. Rose stared at him. You think I'm going to burn down your kitchen? I think ordering food is safer. For whom? Everyone. Rose folded her arms. Dante had enough survival instinct to recognize that posture. What he asked? Nothing. That is not nothing. I'm just realizing something. What? You genuinely think I can't cook? Dante looked confused by the accusation. You told me you don't. I told you I don't cook here. You eat cereal for dinner. Sometimes I like cereal. You burned toast. I was talking to my aunt. You order food. Because Antonio acts like touching his stove requires Vatican approval. From the doorway, Marco coughed to hide a laugh. Dante looked over his shoulder. Marco immediately became interested in the ceiling. Rose returned to the refrigerator. Dante stepped closer. Rose, you do not need to prove anything. That softened her irritation because he meant it kindly. Of course he did. Dante thought he was protecting her from embarrassment. Rose looked past him toward the foyer, where a young soldier sat with his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands. Another man was helping his injured friend remove a blood-stained jacket. These were Dante's people. Whatever they did outside these walls, tonight they were tired, frightened, hungry human beings. Her grandmother's voice returned from years ago. Before you ask what happened, ask whether they've eaten. Rose looked at Dante. How many? 23. Any serious injuries? No. Diet restrictions, Rose. Ask. He stared at her. Why? Because I'm about to feed them. You can't cook. The words came out with such sincere concern that Rose almost laughed. Instead, she placed both palms on the marble island and leaned toward her husband. "No, Dante." He stopped. Rose smiled slowly. "You decided I couldn't cook." Something in her expression finally made him reconsider. Rose pointed toward the foyer. "Go ask about allergies. And tell Marco I need 2 people who can chop vegetables without losing fingers." Dante did not move. "Are you ordering me out of my own kitchen?" Technically, Antonio believes it's his kitchen. Rose. Dante. Another stare. Then, to the astonishment of Marco and 2 guards pretending not to listen, Dante Valenti turned around and walked back toward the foyer. Rose smiled to herself. 5 minutes later, Marco returned with Nico Caruso, a 22-year-old soldier Rose had met twice, and an older guard named Benny. Dante followed, carrying a handwritten list. 1. Shellfish allergy. Carlo cannot have parsley. Sal needs low sugar. Rose took the paper. Good. Dante's eyes narrowed. Why did that not surprise you? Because Carlo's allergy is obvious if you've ever watched him eat around parsley. I have never watched Carlo eat. Yes, I'm beginning to identify the problem. She put Nico on onions and carrots, Benny on garlic and bread, and Marco on opening cans, because his knife skills were immediately disqualifying. Dante remained at the island. Rose pointed at him. You, me, wash your hands. Why? Because if you're going to stand there judging me, you can grate Parmesan. Marco turned away very quickly. Dante looked at the block of cheese as if it represented a hostile negotiation. I run an organization. Congratulations. Tonight you run the cheese. Nico made a choking sound. Dante looked at him. Nico chopped faster. Rose began cooking. That was when Dante stopped smiling. There was no hesitation, no searching recipes, no nervous improvisation. Rose moved through Antonio's kitchen as though she had been deliberately avoiding, revealing she knew its language. Olive oil warmed. Beef browned in batches instead of being crowded into the pot. Onions, carrots, and celery softened until sweet. Garlic went in only after the vegetables because, as Rose informed Benny when he tried to dump it early, burn my garlic and I'll make you explain yourself to Antonio. Tomatoes followed. Stock, herbs. A piece of Parmesan rind Rose found wrapped in the refrigerator. She tasted once, adjusted salt, tasted again. Dante leaned against the island, holding the grater. Where did you learn this? A kitchen? Rose. Do you want my biography or dinner? Both. Dinner first. He grated Parmesan. Badly. Rose looked at the uneven pile. You're murdering it. It is cheese. That attitude is why I didn't trust you with a knife. I have used knives before. I know. That sentence did not reassure me. Marco laughed outright this time. Dante pointed the grater at him. You can still be reassigned. Yes. Boss. Rose tasted the sauce again. More salt? Dante asked. No. How do you know? Because I tasted it. I saw that. Then our communication is improving. He watched her turn toward 3 large pots of boiling water. How long? 25 minutes. For all of them. If everyone stops asking questions. Dante looked at the kitchen. Nico was no longer pale. Benny was buttering bread. Marco had removed his bloody jacket and was arguing with Rose about whether his grandmother used pecorino or parmesan. The tension that had followed them into the house was changing shape. Dante looked at his wife. For the first time since marrying her, he wondered how much of Rosalie Valenti he had never thought to ask about. 27 minutes later, Rose carried the first enormous bowl of pasta into the dining room. The men went quiet. Sit, she said. Nobody moved. Rose looked at Dante. Why are they standing? They're waiting for me. She stared at him. For permission to eat, Dante seemed to realize how ridiculous that sounded only after hearing it aloud. He looked at his men. Sit down. Chairs moved immediately. Rose began serving before anyone could stop her. Carlo. No parsley. Sal. Smaller pasta portion. More chicken. Marco. If that blood is yours after all. Tell me now. Nico. Sit. I can help. You helped. Sit. Nico sat. Dante remained standing at the end of the table. Rose handed him a plate. He looked at it. She raised an eyebrow. You too. 23 men watched their boss. Dante Valenti sat. Someone coughed. Someone else suddenly found his water glass fascinating. Rose returned to the kitchen for bread. When she came back, nobody was talking. For one terrifying second, she thought something was wrong. Then Marco took another bite. Mrs. Valenti. Rose stopped. Yes. He pointed at the plate. What the hell? Her stomach dropped. What? This is incredible. The room erupted. Benny demanded to know why they had been paying Antonio for 20 years. Carlo threatened him for insulting Antonio. Sal asked whether there was more chicken. Someone at the far end wanted the sauce recipe. Rose laughed and told him absolutely not. Dante said nothing. He simply ate. Then he took a second serving. Rose noticed. She chose not to say anything. That mercy lasted 30 seconds. Start small, she asked. Dante slowly looked up. Several men became very interested in their plates. Rose smiled, sweetly. Dante wiped his mouth with a napkin. The toast remains evidence. The toast was an isolated incident. A severe one. Eat your pasta, Mr. Valenti. Yes, Mrs. Valenti. This time, the entire table heard him, and this time, nobody successfully hid their laughter. Rose had no idea that, before the week ended, men who had survived bullets, prison, raids, and Dante Valenti's temper would begin sneaking into her kitchen, looking for leftovers. She had no idea that a handwritten note would soon appear on the refrigerator, telling the night shift to eat whatever they found. She certainly had no idea that one exhausted young soldier named Nico would eventually give her a name the entire Valenti empire would adopt. For now, she only knew 23 hungry men were eating, and her husband, who had spent 3 months believing his chubby wife could not cook, was silently scraping the last of her sauce from his plate with a piece of bread. Rose looked at him. Dante caught her watching. What? Nothing. His eyes narrowed. That is never nothing. Rose smiled. Would you like more? Dante glanced toward the serving bowl, then back at her. Yes. Rose picked it up. Say please. The room went dead silent. Dante stared at his wife. Rose waited. Marco lowered his fork very carefully. Nico looked as though he might stop breathing. Dante Valenti, head of an empire that made grown men reconsider their life choices when he entered a room, held out his plate. Please. Rose served him another spoonful. See, she said, you're trainable. Nico choked on his water, and for the first time that night, Dante laughed. By 9 the next morning, Dante Valenti had learned 3 things. First, his wife could cook. Second, 23 armed men were incapable of keeping that information to themselves. Third, nothing traveled through a criminal organization faster than gossip involving the boss. Rose discovered the problem when she entered the breakfast room and found Dante reading messages instead of the financial report beside his coffee. His phone vibrated again. He looked at the screen, expression flattening. Rose sat across from him. Bad news. Depends on whether you consider my underboss asking if there is any pasta left a security concern. Rose bit the inside of her cheek. Could be coded. It is not coded. Another vibration. Dante read it. Benny has apparently informed the East Gate that my wife makes better ragu than Antonio. Rose winced. Antonio can never know. For Benny's safety. For everyone's. Dante put the phone face down. How many people did you feed last night? 23. Then why do 47 people know? Perhaps your organization needs stronger confidentiality procedures. My organization is excellent at confidentiality. Unless tomato sauce is involved. Dante stared at her. Rose buttered her toast. Properly toasted this time. She held it up. Look. Rehabilitation. Dante's gaze moved from the golden bread to her face. I owe you an apology. Rose paused. She had expected another joke. That sounded painful. It was. Would you like a moment? No. He leaned back. I assumed something about you without asking enough questions. Rose lowered the toast. You did. And then I argued with you about it. Enthusiastically. You are making the apology difficult. I'm making sure you appreciate it. Dante's mouth shifted at one corner. I was wrong. Rose let the silence sit for a beat. Thank you. Then she added, I'm considering having that embroidered. And there it is. Maybe on a pillow. Dante Valenti was wrong. Decorative border. I can still confiscate the toaster. You bought the toaster because you thought I was incompetent. I bought the toaster because the old one was unreliable. Rosestaret. Dante lasted 4 seconds. Fine. Chef Antonio returned shortly before noon. Exhausted, but relieved. Teresa's procedure had gone well. He walked into his kitchen, took 3 steps, and stopped. Rose was at the island with a cup of tea. Dante had made the tactical mistake of accompanying her. Antonio surveyed the room. Every pot had been washed. Every counter gleamed. The large stock pot was drying beside the sink. But a professional chef did not need fingerprints to know someone had invaded his territory. Who cooked? He asked. Nobody answered. Antonio slowly turned toward Rose. She smiled. How is Teresa, who cooked? She's doing well, Rosalie. Dante looked at his wife. He used your first name. This is serious. Antonio opened the refrigerator. His eyes found the remaining container of ragu. He removed the lid. He smelled it. His face became grim. You used my parmesan rind. Rose sipped tea. It was an emergency. My good tomatoes. Also, an emergency. The Barolo Rose hesitated. Antonio clutched his chest. Dante stepped forward. Antonio, you stay out of this. Dante stopped. Rose almost inhaled tea. Antonio tasted the sauce cold. He chewed nothing, because there was nothing to chew. Yet somehow his entire face seemed to be evaluating it. Rose waited. Dante waited. Antonio tasted again. Too much rosemary. Rose gasped. There is barely rosemary. Too much. Your palate is emotional because I touched your kitchen. My palate is perfect. Your wife says you oversalt. Antonio pointed the spoon at her. Teresa is recovering. Do not involve her in this violence. Dante looked between them. Am I witnessing a professional dispute? No. Rose and Antonio said together. Antonio put the container back. Next time. Less rosemary. Rose smiled. Next time, he scowled. Do not become arrogant. That should have ended it. Rose had no intention of taking over Antonio's kitchen. She had enjoyed feeding the men. But she had also gone to bed at nearly 4 and woken with feet that felt as though she had danced on concrete. By afternoon, the mansion returned to its usual rhythm. Dante disappeared into meetings. Rose handled calls for a charity board she served on, answered messages from her family, and deliberately stayed out of the kitchen. At 6, she ate Antonio's perfectly balanced dinner. At 10, she went upstairs with a book. At 12:30, she woke because Dante's side of the bed was still empty. At 1:16, Rose went looking for water and found Nico Caruso sitting alone at the kitchen table. He did not hear her enter. That was the first thing she noticed. The second was his hands. They were trembling. Nico wore the same black trousers from the previous night and a clean grey shirt. But there was a faint rust-colored stain near one cuff that washing had not completely removed. He sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. A glass of water stood untouched on the table. Rose stopped in the doorway. Nico, his head snapped up. For 1 second, his face was not the face of one of Dante's soldiers. He looked 22, maybe younger. Then the mask returned. Mrs. Valenti. Sorry, I didn't know anyone was awake. You're allowed to sit in a kitchen. Yes. Mum. Rose crossed to the refrigerator. When did you last eat? I'm fine. She looked over her shoulder. Nico gave a tired sigh. Why does everyone in this house ask questions they already know the answer to? Because apparently everyone in this house gives bad answers. I ate last night, at 2 a.m. Yes. It is now 1 a.m. again. I wasn't hungry today. Rose closed the refrigerator door. There were questions she could have asked. What happened during the attack? Whose blood had been on his sleeve? Why had he spent the day unable to eat? Where had Dante sent him afterward? Instead, she said, 3 spoonfuls. Nico blinked. What's it? I am sitting. Excellent. You're already succeeding. Rose found chicken stock Antonio had prepared that morning. A container of cooked rice. Carrots, celery, lemon, and eggs. Nothing elaborate. Nothing that required waking the house. She tied an apron over her nightdress and put a small pot on the stove. Nico watched her. You don't have to cook for me. I know. I can make a sandwich. Are you going to silence? That's what I thought. Rose warmed the stock slowly, added rice and shredded chicken, then whisked an egg with lemon juice in a bowl. Nico's eyes followed her hands. Is that the same thing from last night? No. What is it? Something my grandmother made when people claimed they weren't hungry. Did it work? She had 6 children. Nobody won arguments. That earned the smallest smile. Rose tempered the egg mixture with hot broth, poured it back into the pot, and stirred until the soup became pale and silky. She added pepper, tasted, then ladled a modest portion into a bowl. Nico stared at it. 3 spoonfuls. Rose repeated, I'm not 6. Then this should be easy. He took one. Rose turned away deliberately and began cleaning the counter. 2nd spoonful. She rinsed the whisk. 3rd. When she looked back, Nico had taken a 4th. Rose said nothing. He ate slowly. Halfway through the bowl, his shoulders dropped. By the time he finished, his hands had stopped trembling. More, she asked. He shook his head. Okay. Rose sat across from him. Nico stared into the empty bowl. My friend got shot. There it was. Rose did not move. He's alive, Nico continued. They got him to the hospital. Doctor says he'll probably be okay. His thumb rubbed the edge of the bowl. I froze. For how long, I don't know. A second. Maybe 2. And then I pulled him behind the truck. Rose waited. I should have moved faster. Maybe? Nico looked up. Surprised. Rose folded her hands. I wasn't there. I'm not going to tell you what you should have done when I didn't have bullets coming at me. His eyes dropped again. But he's alive. Yes. You pulled him behind the truck. Yes. Then whatever you're feeling about those 2 seconds, you don't have to solve it tonight. Nico swallowed. Rose stood and took his bowl. He caught her wrist lightly before she could turn away, then immediately released it. Sorry. It's fine. Thank you. You're welcome. He rubbed both hands over his face. Then, with the exhausted recklessness of someone whose brain had stopped supervising his mouth, he said, Thanks. Mama Rose. Rose froze. Nico froze. A voice from the doorway said, "Mama Rose." Both turned. Dante stood there in shirt sleeves, tie gone, one eyebrow raised. Nico looked like he wanted the floor to open. Rose slowly pointed toward the sink. "Every pot. What, you heard me? Mrs. Valenti. Every pot. There are like 12. Should have considered that before aging me 30 years. Nico stood, laughing despite himself. "Yes, Mama Rose." Rose grabbed a dish towel and threw it at him. He ducked. Dante caught it. For one extraordinary moment, the head of the Valenti organization stood in his kitchen at nearly 2 in the morning, holding a floral dish towel, while one of his soldiers laughed, and his wife threatened him with cookware. Dante looked at Nico. "You okay?" The laughter faded, but not completely. "Yes, boss." Dante's gaze moved to the empty bowl, then to Rose. He understood enough not to ask the rest. "Go home after the pots," he said. "Yes, boss." Rose frowned. "He doesn't have to actually wash all 12. Nizzo stare dat her. You just sentenced me. I was establishing authority." Dante handed the towel back to him. "Sentence upheld. Traitor," Rose muttered. Nico began filling the sink. Dante followed Rose into the hall. "You cooked again." He hadn't eaten. "That is not a defense." It wasn't a crime. In Antonio's kitchen after midnight, the distinction is debatable. Rose looked at him. "How long were you standing there?" "Long enough." "That is evasive. I learned from you." She started toward the stairs. Dante walked beside her. After several steps, he said, "Thank you." Rose stopped. For soup. For noticing him. The humor left her face. Dante looked toward the kitchen behind them. "Nico joined us at 19. His father worked for mine. He tries very hard to make everyone forget how young he is. He shouldn't have to." "No." Rose studied her husband. "Did you eat?" Dante closed his eyes. She smiled. "You walked directly into that." "I had lunch." "What time, Rose?" "What time for?" "It's almost 2. I'm not hungry." Rose turned around. Dante caught her elbow gently. "Where are you going to make you soup?" "No. 3 spoonfuls." "I am not, Nico." "Correct." He listens faster. Dante stared at her. Rose stared back. 5 minutes later, Dante Valenti was sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of soup. Nico, still washing pots, wisely, said nothing. He did. However, smile at the sink. The nickname should have died there. It did not. At 7 the next morning, Rose entered the kitchen and found a folded piece of paper beside the coffee machine. "Thank you, Mama Rose." Nico Rose crumpled it. Then she smoothed it out and put it in a drawer before anyone saw. At 8:15, Benny came through the back entrance after finishing the night shift. Rose happened to be drinking coffee at the island while Antonio inspected produce. Benny tipped his head. "Morning, Mama Rose." A grape hit him in the chest. Antonio turned. "What did he call you?" "Nothing." Benny caught the grape and ate it. "Mama Rose." "Benny, thank you for dinner." "You're welcome." "Stop talking." Antonio looked delighted. "Mama Rose." Rose pointed at him. "You are too old to participate in this." "I am exactly old enough." Dante entered in time to see his chef laughing, his wife threatening 2 grown men with fruit, and Benny retreating toward the door. "What is happening?" Rose answered immediately. "A breakdown in discipline." Benny called from the hall. "Morning, boss." Then, louder morning. Mama Rose reached for another grape, but he was already gone. Dante poured coffee. "Why are they calling you that?" "Because your employees have no respect." From inside the pantry, Antonio shouted, "Love you too." Mama Dante slowly looked toward the pantry. Rose covered her face. The problem grew over the next 4 days, not because Rose encouraged it. She actively discouraged it. That seemed to make everyone enjoy it more. It also did not help that the Rossi dispute continued disrupting schedules. Dante's men were rotating through long shifts at warehouses, gates, garage, and offices. Rose began noticing untouched takeout containers in the security room and guards living on coffee. She did not announce a program. She simply started leaving food. The first night it was sandwiches wrapped in parchment with names written on top because Sal needed different bread. The second night it was a pot of soup. The third, Antonio caught her making meatballs at 11 and complained for 15 minutes before silently bringing her a larger mixing bowl. "More breadcrumbs," he said. "I know. You were about to forget." "I was not. Your face was forgetting." "My face has never forgotten anything," Antonio snorted. By midnight, there were 40 meatballs cooling on trays. Rose wrote a note and taped it to the refrigerator. "Night shift. Eat." She considered adding, "Please," then decided hungry armed men should not require excessive politeness. The next morning, someone had written beneath it, "Yes." "Mama." Rose crossed it out. The following night, "Thank you." "Mama." She crossed that out too. On Friday, Mama says eat your vegetables. Rose stared at the handwriting. Dante appeared in the doorway a minute later. "What happened?" She pointed at the refrigerator. He read the note. His face remained perfectly serious. "That is troubling. You're enjoying this." "I would never." "You have a dimple." "I do not." "You absolutely do." Dante walked closer to inspect the note. "Do you know who wrote it?" "No. I can have security review the cameras." Rose stared at him. Dante lasted 2 seconds before laughing. It was the first time Rose heard him laugh without restraint. Not the brief breath through his nose he used during meetings. Not the low chuckle he gave when she insulted him. A real laugh. It transformed his face. Rose forgot the refrigerator. Dante noticed her staring. "What?" "Nothing." His laughter faded into suspicion. "That is never nothing." Rose turned away too quickly. "Go run your empire." "Yes." "Mama Rose." She spun around. Dante was already walking away. Dante Valenti. His shoulders moved with another laugh. Rose stood in the kitchen, holding a wooden spoon, and discovered, inconveniently, that she was smiling. The food became part of the house before either of them realized it. Rose learned names. Not because she was trying to build influence. She simply disliked speaking to someone 3 times and still calling him you. There was Luis at the South Gate, whose wife had just had a baby. Mickey Russo, who claimed vegetables were a government conspiracy. Carlo, with the parsley allergy. Sal, who now carried glucose tablets because Rose had discovered he had repeatedly forgotten them. Benny, who had 3 daughters and therefore feared nothing except disappointing Antonio. And Nico, who started appearing in the kitchen after difficult shifts, even when he did not need food. Sometimes he talked. Sometimes he ate. Rose never demanded one in exchange for the other. Dante noticed all of it. He also noticed his refrigerator had become a communications center. A container labeled "Louis Take Home for Anna." A plate labeled "Carlo No Parsley." A paper bag labeled "Mickey Yes." The green things are vegetables. Survive it. And, increasingly, food labeled Dante. The first time he saw his own name. He carried the container upstairs. Rose was reading in bed. He held it up. "What is this?" She looked over the top of her book. "Food. I recognize the concept. Progress. It has my name on it. So Mickey doesn't eat it. Why would Mickey eat my dinner? Mickey eats everything." Dante sat on the edge of the bed. I had dinner. No. You attended a dinner. He paused. How do you know I didn't eat? You came home angry. I often come home angry. Tonight you were hungry, angry. There are categories, several. I'm afraid to ask. You should be. Dante looked at the container. Rose returned to her book. He opened it. Chicken, roasted potatoes, vegetables, still warm. You made this with Antonio. For me, no. Dante. I labeled it with your name as an elaborate psychological experiment. He looked at her. Rose lowered the book. Something in his expression made her sarcasm soften. Yes. For you. Why? The question surprised her. Because you hadn't eaten. Dante looked down at the food. Nobody had ever needed a reason to feed him. Restaurants fed him because he paid. Staff fed him because it was their job. Business associates fed him because meals were useful settings for negotiations. Rose fed him because he had not eaten. He took a bite. Rose watched for exactly half a second before pretending to read. It's good, he said. I know. Dante smiled. The next evening he came home at 7:30. Rose was in the kitchen. She looked at the clock, then at him. Are you ill? No. Did someone cancel a war? No. You're home before 9. I live here. Debatable. Dante removed his jacket and placed it over a chair. Antonio was plating dinner. Rose watched Dante sit at the island. He did not open his phone. He did not ask for coffee. He simply stayed. You're waiting for dinner, she said. Yes, with me, if that is permitted. Rose narrowed her eyes. Dante looked innocent. It was a terrible performance. You came home because I'm cooking. I came home because this is my house. Liar, prove it. Rose put a plate in front of him. Dante looked down. Pasta with lemon, garlic, parmesan, and black pepper. He took one bite. Rose leaned against the counter. Well, too much rosemary. There is no rosemary. I learned criticism from Antonio. From across the kitchen, Antonio raised a fist in approval. Rose laughed. Dante looked at her. The room was warm. Antonio was humming. Something simmered on the stove. Rose's cheeks were flushed from the heat. Her apron tied around her generous waist. A curl loose beside her face. Dante had married her because the match made sense. That fact suddenly felt dangerously insufficient. His phone rang. The moment ended. Dante checked the screen. His expression changed. Rose recognized the transformation now. Husband disappeared. Boss returned. What happened, Rossi? Antonio stopped humming. Dante answered the call and walked toward the hall. Rose did not follow. 10 minutes later, he returned for his jacket. How bad? Not bad yet. Meaning I intend to keep it that way. Rose nodded. Dante put on his jacket. She reached for a container on the counter. What is that? Dinner. I just ate. Not yours. Rose packed 2 portions. Added bread. Then handed him the bag. For whoever hasn't. Dante looked at it. Then at her. You don't even know where I'm going. I know you won't be alone. He took the bag. Rose. Yes, his hand tightened slightly around the paper handles. Thank you. She smiled. Bring the container back. Dante stared at her. Your concern is touching. Antonio counts them. From behind the stove, Antonio said, I do. Dante left. 3 hours later, in a warehouse on the other side of the city. The meeting with the Rossi representatives ended without bloodshed. Barely. Dante's men remained tense after the other crew departed. Nico stood near the loading doors. Marco was on the phone. Carlo had been awake nearly 20 hours. Dante looked at the paper bag Rose had sent. He put it on a crate. Food. Carlo looked over. From the house. Yes. Nico walked closer. He saw Rose's handwriting on the container. His tired face brightened. Mama Rose Dante gave him a look. Nico cleared his throat. Mrs. Valenti Dante opened the container. Lemon pasta. Enough for 2. Maybe 3, if they shared. Carlo appeared beside Nico. Then Marco ended his call. Within 30 seconds, Dante was standing around a wooden crate with 3 of his most trusted men, distributing his wife's dinner using plastic forks found in an office drawer. Carlo took 1 bite. Boss. What? Respectfully. Dante waited. You married very well. Nico nodded solemnly. Very well. Marco took another forkful. Extremely well. Dante looked at the 3 men. This was my dinner. Nico pointed at the container. Mama said it was for whoever hadn't eaten. Dante's eyes narrowed. Nico took another bite anyway. The next morning, Rose came downstairs to find a small bouquet of supermarket flowers on the kitchen island. No card. Beside it sat the clean container Dante had taken. Rose picked up the flowers. Who brought these? Antonio shrugged. Somebody from the warehouse. Who didn't say. Rose looked at Dante when he entered. He looked at the flowers. Then at her. What did you buy these? No. Do you know who did yes? Who I was instructed not to disclose operational information. Rosestaret. Dante puer espresso. You are impossible. So I'm told. Antonio set a plate of eggs in front of him. Dante. Sat. Rose was still holding the flowers. A guard passed the open kitchen doorway, saw her, and smiled. Morning. Mama. Rose. Rose sighed. Another voice farther down the hall answered. Morning. Mama. Then another. Dante slowly lifted his coffee. Rose pointed at him. Do something. About what? Your empire. He considered the request, while voices and laughter traveled down the corridor. Then Dante looked at his wife, standing barefoot in his kitchen, with cheap flowers in one hand and irritation on her face. My empire appears happy. Your empire is annoying. That too. Rose put the flowers in water. She did not throw them away. And Dante, watching her from across the kitchen, they began to understand that the name spreading through his organization had very little to do with pasta. The men liked her cooking, but that was not why Nico had called her Mama. It was because she noticed when hands shook, because she remembered who had not eaten, because she gave food without demanding explanations, because in a world where every kindness usually arrived with a debt attached, Rose fed people and let the meal be the end of the transaction. Dante looked down at his breakfast. For years, he had believed taking care of people meant making sure they were paid, armed, protected, and useful. His wife had been in his house for 3 months. In less than a week, she had begun teaching his empire a different definition. Rose turned from the flowers. Why are you staring at me? Dante lifted his espresso. I'm reassessing something. That sounds dangerous. It is. What his gaze settled on her. My wife. Rose blinked. Before she could answer, Antonio shoved a basket of bread between them. Enough staring. Eat. Rose laughed. Dante obeyed. And from somewhere beyond the kitchen came Nico's unmistakable voice. Listen to Mama Rose. Rose closed her eyes. Dante smiled into his coffee. By the end of the 2nd week, Dante Valenti had stopped asking why men from 3 different crews were finding excuses to pass through his kitchen and started asking Marco whether any of them were actually supposed to be there. The answer was usually no. Rose discovered this one morning when she came downstairs and found Mickey Russo leaning against the refrigerator with the guilty posture of a schoolboy caught stealing cookies. What are you doing? She asked. Mickey straightened. Inventory. Rose looked at the paper bag in his hand. Inventory tastes like roast beef now. Quality control. For whose department? Mickey considered this. Mine. Rose held out her hand. He surrendered the sandwich. This says, Louis. Luis is on Southgate. Exactly. I was delivering it. By taking a bite, Mickey glanced toward the hall. Apparently searching for tactical assistance, Dante entered at that exact moment, took in the scene, and made the catastrophic choice to look amused. Rose turned on him. Do something. Dante looked at Mickey. Did you steal Luis's sandwich? Mickey hesitated. Define steal. Dante nodded toward Rose. You're on your own, coward. Mickey muttered. Rose took a wooden spoon from the counter and pointed it at him. Replacement sandwich. You make it. Mickey's eyes widened. Me. Yes. I don't cook. Then today we discover whether incompetence is contagious. Dante leaned against the island, arms folded, and watched one of his senior men make a sandwich under Rose's supervision while two guards in the doorway tried not to laugh. When Mickey finally carried the replacement out, Rose looked at Dante. Your empire is badly trained. Dante's mouth curved. My empire obeys me. It steals lunch from each other. That is a separate department. The joke would have remained harmless if the nickname had not continued spreading. It no longer belonged only to Nico and the night shift. Drivers used it. Guards used it. Two men from the docks used it after Rose sent trays of baked pasta to a crew working through a storm. Antonio used it whenever he wanted to irritate her. Even Teresa, back home from the hospital and recovering well, had called one afternoon to say, Mama Rose, my husband says you stole his kitchen. Rose had answered, Your husband lies, while Antonio shouted from across the room that betrayal had entered his marriage. Dante heard all of it. At first he treated the name as a novelty, something funny that had attached itself to his wife, because his men had apparently never been fed properly in their lives. Then he began noticing what happened when Rose entered a room. Men who interrupted him without thinking twice became strangely attentive when she asked whether they had eaten. Carlo, who could argue with three capos at once, hid a bag of chips behind his back when Rose walked into a meeting. Benny began carrying fruit because Rose had once told him that coffee was not breakfast. Sal's glucose readings improved enough that his doctor noticed. Nico had stopped looking like he might break apart every time the Rossi situation turned ugly. None of this made Rose powerful in the way Dante understood power. She issued no orders, controlled no crews, moved no money, and asked for no loyalty. Yet people rearranged themselves around her anyway. Dante began coming home for dinner more often. He never announced this change, which meant Rose noticed immediately. The first 2 nights, she said nothing. The third, he walked into the kitchen at 7:12 and found her sitting on the counter while Antonio shaped gnocchi. You're early, she said. Dante removed his jacket. I live here. You said that last time. It remains true. Statistically less true before 9. Antonio made a sound that might have been a laugh. Dante ignored him. Rose watched Dante sit at the island. He did not open his phone. That was new too. Antonio slid a small plate toward him without comment. Danciaci. Rose narrowed her eyes. You're waiting for dinner. I'm eating. You're strategically positioned near the stove. Coincidence? Rose looked at Antonio. Do you believe him? Never. Dante, Sihil. I made one mistake in trusting either of you. Rose smiled. Which one? The first conversation. Antonio pointed a flour-covered finger at him. Eat and complain less. Danciate. Rose looked away before anyone could see how much she liked the sight. The rhythm became dangerous because it felt ordinary. Dante returned. Rose cooked sometimes and let Antonio cook other nights. They ate together more often. He learned that she hated olives, but loved anchovies. which he considered evidence of moral inconsistency. She learned that when he was truly angry, he became quieter rather than louder. She also learned that he did not dislike sweets as much as he claimed. He merely preferred stealing bites from her dessert instead of ordering his own. One night, after catching him with her tiramisu spoon halfway to his mouth, Rose said, "You could ask." Dante took the bite. "I did." When, internally. Fascinating. Next time, communicate externally. He handed the spoon back. "You married me knowing I had flaws. I knew you were a mafia boss. I didn't realize dessert theft was part of the package." His expression shifted. "You say that very casually. What mafia boss? Should I whisper it?" "Most people do." Rose looked at him. "Most people are not married to you." The sentence landed harder than she intended. Dante went still. Rose felt the air change. Neither of them looked away. Then Antonio entered carrying coffee and announced, "If you two are going to stare like that, do it somewhere. I am not trying to work." The moment broke, but not completely. Rose's influence on the kitchen expanded only because need kept appearing. A guard's wife delivered twins early, and Rose sent enough food for 3 days. One of the warehouse men lost his father, and she made a tray of baked ziti because grief made people forget basic things. A driver's daughter turned 8, and Rose decorated cupcakes because the bakery cancelled. None of these acts felt significant to her. To Dante, they were becoming impossible to ignore. He had built systems for emergencies, compensation for injured men, payments to widows, lawyers for arrests, doctors who did not ask questions. He believed this was what responsibility looked like. Rose did something less efficient and somehow more effective. She remembered the daughter's name. She knew which widow hated lilies. She sent food without making anyone sign for it. She showed up at the kitchen door at midnight and asked, "Who hasn't eaten with the same seriousness Dante used when asking which route was compromised?" The Rossi conflict worsened on a Thursday afternoon. One of Dante's smaller warehouses was hit hard enough to send 6 men to the hospital. Nobody died, but 2 needed surgery. By evening, the mansion filled with families waiting for updates. Wives sat in the formal drawing room. Children slept across sofas. Men moved between phones and doorways. Dante spent hours coordinating security, lawyers, doctors, and retaliation plans. Rose looked at the room and understood that nobody needed another armed man. They needed somewhere to wait without coming apart. She went to the kitchen. Antonio joined her without being asked. Together, they made soup, bread, trays of chicken, coffee, tea, and enough small sandwiches for children who kept refusing full meals. Teresa arrived with containers. Benny carried chairs. Nico set up a table near the back hall. Nobody announced a plan. The house simply reorganized around the kitchen. A woman named Elena Marquez arrived shortly before midnight. Her husband, Thomas, was one of the men in surgery. She came in holding the hand of a 5-year-old boy and wearing a coat over pajamas. Rose had met her once at a charity dinner. Elena looked around the crowded room as if she had forgotten how to breathe. Rose crossed to her. "Come sit." Elena shook her head. "I need Dante. He's getting an update. I need to know if Tomas..." Her voice broke. Rose took the little boy's backpack from her shoulder. "He'll come to you the second he knows. Right now, sit." Elena allowed herself to be guided into the kitchen. Rose put hot tea in front of her and a plate in front of the boy. He stared at it. "No mushrooms?" he asked. "No mushrooms. I hate mushrooms." "Excellent. We have established common ground." He ate. Elena did not. Rose did not insist. She simply sat beside her until Dante appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later. Dante looked exhausted. Every conversation around him stopped. Elena stood so quickly her chair scraped. Dante crossed the room. Tomas is out of surgery. Elena covered her mouth. He's stable. Doctor says the next 12 hours matter. But the surgery went well. Elena made a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. Rose caught her before her knees gave way. Dante stood there for 1 second, watching Rose hold a woman whose husband worked for him, while a small boy continued eating soup because Rose had remembered to remove the mushrooms. Something inside him shifted. Later, when Elena was calmer, she wrapped both arms around Rose and whispered, "Thank you, Mama." Rose froze. This time, nobody laughed. Nico, standing near the pantry, looked down. Antonio stopped moving. Dante heard the word land in a room where it suddenly meant something different. Elena pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. Nico calls you that." "And I?" Rose shook her head. "It's okay." Elena's eyes filled again. "You stayed with me." Rose touched her arm. "Of course, you didn't have to." "I know." Dante looked away before Rose could see his expression. The next morning, the house was quieter. Families had gone to hospitals or home. The kitchen looked as though it had survived a campaign. Rose stood at the sink washing coffee mugs because Antonio had finally gone to sleep. Dante came in at 6:30. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were red. Rose turned off the water. "Did you sleep?" "No." "Eat, Rose." "That is not an answer." He sat without arguing. She reheated soup. Dante watched her move. "Elena called you Mama." Rose's shoulders tightened. "I heard. You didn't threaten her with pots. It didn't feel funny." "No." Rose set the bowl down. Dante looked at it, but did not eat immediately. When Nico first said it, "I thought it was because you cooked." Rose sat opposite him. It was because he was exhausted and lost control of his mouth. "Maybe." Dante looked toward the hallway. "Last night I understood it wasn't about the food." Rose went quiet. He continued, "The food is how you get people to sit down long enough to remember they're human." Rose blinked. "That was almost poetic. Do not tell anyone." "Too late. I'm writing it down." His mouth shifted, then turned serious again. "You know more about what people in my organization are carrying than I do." "Not more. Different things." "Yes." Dante took a spoonful. "I know which men are loyal. You know which ones haven't slept. Someone should know both." By the weekend, the Rossi problem had become serious enough that Dante moved several meetings to a warehouse on the north side. Rose did not ask for details. She had learned there were questions he would answer and questions he would not. In exchange, Dante had learned that "don't worry" was not useful information. He told her when he would be home. He told her when plans changed. He told her if someone was hurt. It was not transparency. Exactly. But it was trust being assembled in small pieces. On Sunday afternoon, Rose loaded trays of food into 2 vehicles because nearly 100 men had been at the warehouse since dawn. Dante found her supervising containers. "What is this?" "Lunch." "For whom? Everyone." "Rose, there are 93 people there." 97. Marco texted. Dante stared at her. "Marco texted you. He wanted to know if there was coffee. My underboss is coordinating catering with my wife. Your underboss is hungry." Dante rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You are not going to the warehouse." Rose looked at him. "Why?" "Because the Rossi situation is unstable. Is the warehouse under threat?" "Not directly." "Will you be there?" "Yes." "Marco, yes. 40 armed men. More. Then either your empire is competent enough for me to bring lunch, or you have larger problems." Dante's jaw tightened. "Rose." She softened before he could turn worry into command. "I'm not trying to prove anything. If you tell me there is an active threat, I stay home." "Is there?" He paused. "No. Then ask me what I want to do. Dante looked at her for several seconds. Do you want to come? Yes. He exhaled. Fine. Rose smiled. See marriage. The warehouse went silent when Rose entered carrying a tray of bread. Dante had arrived 10 minutes earlier and was standing with Carlo near a loading map. Rose expected attention because she was the boss's wife. What she did not expect was recognition. Someone near the back shouted, Mama Rose. Another voice answered, Mama. A third man whistled. Then the entire room seemed to catch the joke at once. Mama Rose came from one side. Over here. Mama from another. Rose stopped dead. Dante slowly turned toward the noise. Nearly 100 men drivers, guards, soldiers. Warehouse workers were grinning at his wife like she had just walked into a family reunion. Rose's face turned red. Absolutely not. That only made it worse. Nico appeared from behind a stack of crates. Delighted. Mama, you came. Rose pointed at him. This is your fault. I accept responsibility. You shouldn't. Carlo took a tray from her. Welcome. Mama Rose. Carlo, I know where you live. Everybody does. Marco arrived carrying coffee. You brought enough, Rose stared at him. You counted 97. 2 more arrived. Rose closed her eyes. Of course they did. Dante stood in the middle of his own warehouse and watched his organization greet his wife with more enthusiasm than it had greeted him all week. He should have been irritated. A small part of him probably was. Instead, he found himself laughing. Rose heard it and turned on him. Do not encourage them. Dante raised both hands. I have lost control of the situation. You are the boss. Apparently not in food-related matters. Nico called from the serving table. Mama, where's the soup? Rose spun toward him. Nico Caruso. If you call me Mama one more time. Yes. Mama. The warehouse erupted. Rose grabbed a bread roll and threw it. Nico ducked. The roll hit Marco in the shoulder. Even Carlo laughed. Eventually, everyone ate. Rose moved through the room correcting plates, making sure Carlo avoided parsley, telling Mickey to stop pretending meat counted as a vegetable, and sending 2 extra containers to men on perimeter duty. Dante watched from a distance until Marco stepped beside him. Boss. What? Marco nodded toward Rose. You married well. You already told me. Worth repeating. Dante looked around the warehouse. Men who had spent the week tense and angry were eating, joking, and for 20 minutes not thinking about Rossi. They love her, Marco said. Dante's expression changed. Careful. Marco smiled. I didn't say more than you. Dante looked at him. Marco walked away before the threat became specific. Rose found Dante near the office door after the last trays were empty. Why are you standing alone? Observing. That sounds sinister. It often is. Rose leaned against the wall beside him. From across the warehouse, someone shouted, Thanks. Mama Rose raised a hand without turning. You're all dead to me. Dante smiled. Convincing. I hate this nickname. No, you don't. She looked at him. Excuse me, you hate being embarrassed by it. Rose opened her mouth, then closed it. Dante continued. But you kept Nico's note. Rose's eyes narrowed. You went through my drawer, Antonio found it when looking for foil, and told you Antonio has no loyalty. True. Rose looked out at the room. I don't want them to think I'm trying to be something here. What would they think you're trying to be important? Dante's expression hardened slightly. Rose. She looked at him. You are my wife. That's not what I mean. I know. He looked toward Nico, laughing with 2 other men near the loading bay. They are not calling you Mama because you asked for authority. Rose went quiet. They call you that because you make them feel cared for in a place where care is usually transactional. Her throat tightened. Dante glanced at her. I told you not to tell anyone I was poetic. This is worse. Why? You're being emotionally perceptive. I can stop. Please don't. For a moment, the warehouse noise faded around them. Rose looked at her husband and realized that he was looking at her differently than he had 3 weeks earlier. Not as the Bellini daughter he had married. Not as the curvy wife he provided for because that was his duty. Not even as the woman who could cook despite his assumptions. He was seeing the space she occupied in his world and understanding that it had grown without either of them negotiating it. Dante lifted one hand as if he might touch her face, then stopped before he did. Rose noticed the hesitation. He noticed her noticing. The air between them shifted. Then Nico shouted, "Boss, Mama says you need to eat." Rose closed her eyes. Dante's hand dropped. "I did not say that." Nico pointed at Rose's untouched plate on a nearby table. "You were thinking it." Dante looked at his wife. Rose looked at Nico. "I am going to poison him." Dante laughed. "Please don't. He's useful. Debatable." Dante picked up the plate. Rose watched him take a bite. Across the warehouse, nearly 100 men went back to work. Dante Valenti had spent years building an empire people respected because they feared what happened if they betrayed it. Rose had walked into the same empire with soup, bread, and a wooden spoon, and somehow, without asking anyone for loyalty, she was teaching them how it felt to belong. The first sign that something had gone wrong was not a phone call. It was Dante leaving his coffee untouched. Rose noticed because Dante Valenti did not abandon coffee. He might abandon sleep, dinner, common sense, and occasionally every social skill his mother had ever attempted to teach him. But the espresso beside his right hand disappeared with mechanical reliability. That Monday morning, it sat cooling on the kitchen island while Dante read the same message twice. Rose was shaping dough beside Antonio. She wiped flour from her fingers and watched his face become still in the particular way she had learned to fear. What happened? Dante looked up. A transport team missed check-in. Antonio stopped kneading. Rose asked, "How many? 5?" Who Dante hesitated only a second. "Nico is one of them." Rose's hands went motionless. 3 weeks earlier, that name would have belonged to one of dozens of young men who moved through Dante's organization. Now, she knew Nico hated mushrooms, drank terrible vending machine coffee, called his mother every Sunday, and became excessively cheerful whenever he was frightened. She also knew he had started sleeping better. Where, she asked. "South Route." "Rossi." "Probably." Dante stood. Rose caught his wrist before he could turn away. His eyes dropped to her hand, then rose to her face. "Don't tell me not to worry." "I wasn't going to." "Don't tell me everything will be fine either." "I wasn't going to do that." Rose searched his expression. "Then tell me what you know." Dante gave her the truth. The vehicle had been found abandoned. There was blood inside. Not enough to identify whose. 2 phones had been recovered. No bodies. No contact. Search teams were already moving. "That's all I know," he said. Rose released his wrist. "Okay." Dante waited, perhaps expecting questions he could not answer. Rose picked up the towel beside the dough and folded it once. "Bring them home." His expression changed. "I intend to." "Good." She looked toward the back hall where Marco was already calling for him. "What do you need from me?" Dante almost said nothing. She saw the word form and die. He had learned. "Can you handle the house?" he asked instead. Rose nodded. "Bring them home. I'll handle everything else." But then, the mansion no longer resembled a residence. It became a relay point between search teams, drivers, families, doctors, and men coming in for 20 minutes before leaving again. Rose did not ask for operational details she could not use. She asked different questions. How many teams were leaving? How long would they be out? Who had eaten? Who needed coffee? Which families had been notified? Antonio understood immediately. Within an hour, the kitchen became a support center. Stock pots occupied every burner. Sandwiches accumulated in rows. Coffee went into insulated containers. Water, fruit, bread, and first aid supplies were packed into boxes. Teresa arrived without being called and took over labeling. Benny carried crates. Carlo came in for a radio battery and left with 2 sandwiches because Rose caught him attempting to claim he had eaten. When she demanded, "Yesterday." "That is not the impressive answer you think it is." "Mama, I'm busy." Rose put another sandwich in his coat pocket. "Now you're busy with lunch." Carlo looked toward Dante, who had entered behind him. Boss Dante did not even slow down. "Do what she says." Carlo stared after him. Rose folded her arms. "See, this organization has collapsed. Eat." He ate. Dante returned to the kitchen repeatedly, never for more than a minute. Each time Rose gave him something. Information if she had it. Coffee if he needed it. Food whether he claimed to need it or not. At noon he took half a sandwich while speaking into his phone. At 2 she put a bowl of soup in front of him, and he ate 6 spoonfuls before Marco called him away. At 4 he came in with rain on his coat and frustration carved into his face. "Nothing," Rose asked. "We found the van they used to switch vehicles. Blood some. Bodies." "No." Rose nodded once. No bodies meant possibility. She held on to that. Dante looked toward the long preparation table. 5 covered bowls sat at one end, each marked with a name: Nico, Gabe, Tommy, Leo, Sam. Dante's gaze stopped. "What are those?" "Dinner." "Rose." "What? They're not here." "I noticed." "You should put those away." Rose continued cutting bread. "No, it could be hours. Then, Antonio can reheat it. It could be longer." The knife stopped. Rose looked at him. "Nobody eats their portion until we know they aren't coming home." Dante went silent. Antonio did too. Rose's voice remained steady, even though her throat hurt. "Those bowls stay." Dante looked at the 5 names, then back at his wife. "Okay." It was the only answer she would accept. The hours after dark were worse because activity slowed while fear did not. Families arrived. Nico's mother called twice from another state, and Rose spoke to her the second time because Dante was coordinating a search near the river. Rose did not promise what she could not guarantee. She said they were looking. She said Dante had every available person searching. She said Nico was not being abandoned. Afterward, she stood alone in the pantry for 30 seconds, both hands gripping a shelf, until Antonio found her. He did not ask whether she was all right. He put a tray of onions beside her and said, "Chop." Rose laughed once despite herself. "You're using kitchen labor as therapy. Cheaper than doctors. You're terrible. Chop." She chopped. When she emerged, Dante was standing at the island. His tie was gone. There was mud on one trouser leg. Rose looked at him. He shook his head. "Nothing yet." She put a plate in front of him. "No. Dante. I can't. 3 bites." "Rose, you don't get to become useless because you're scared." His eyes snapped to hers. Anyone else might have regretted the sentence. Rose did not. "You think I don't know?" she asked quietly. "I'm scared too." "Eat." Dante sat. He ate 3 bites. Then 4. At 11:40, a radio call came through the security room, and the entire house changed. Rose was pouring coffee when Marco appeared in the kitchen doorway, so fast he nearly hit Benny. "Found them." The coffee pot struck the counter. Rose turned. "Alive." 4 confirmed alive. 1 unconscious. "We don't have all names yet. We're old machine shop off Calder." Dante was already moving past him. Rose caught his sleeve. "Nico, We don't know. Dante. He turned. For 1 second, the boss disappeared, and she saw the man who knew exactly what Nico's absence meant to her. I'll bring him home if he's there. Rose nodded. Go. He went. The next 48 minutes lasted longer than the previous 14 hours. Rose did not pace, because pacing frightened the families. She did not stare at her phone because everyone else was already doing that. She made tea nobody wanted, checked bread nobody needed, and rearranged the 5 bowls twice. Then headlights swept across the front windows. Someone shouted from the foyer. Rose moved before she consciously decided to. The first SUV stopped beneath the portico. Gabe emerged with a bandage around his head. Tommy followed, limping. Sam came out, supported by 2 men. Rose counted. 1, 2, 3. A second vehicle arrived. Leo was carried out on a stretcher, conscious enough to curse at the paramedic. 4. Rose's heart hammered. The third vehicle stopped. Nico climbed out under his own power. He looked terrible. His face was bruised, his lower lip split, one sleeve torn, and a white bandage wrapped around his ribs beneath an open jacket. But he was walking. Rose stopped at the top of the steps. Nico saw her. His expression broke into the exhausted, ridiculous grin she knew. Mama Rose. Rose went down the steps so quickly Dante, following behind him, reached out as if prepared to catch her. She stopped directly in front of Nico and looked him over from head to toe. Are you bleeding? Not anymore. Did a doctor see you? Yes. Did you get hit in the head? Only emotionally. Rose slapped his arm. Nico winced. Ow. Good. Then she pulled him against her. Nico went still before wrapping his arms around her. Rose closed her eyes. You idiot. His voice came muffled against her shoulder. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just don't do it again. I'll put that in the tactical plan. She pulled back and wiped at her face angrily. Nico looked toward the house. Please, tell me you saved me soup. Rose stared at him. You were missing for 14 hours, and that is your first question second. First was whether you were mad. I am furious. So, soup. Behind him, Dante laughed from sheer exhaustion. Rose pointed toward the kitchen. Sit down before I change my mind. Within 20 minutes, all 5 bowls were being eaten. Leo's went to the hospital with him. The others sat around the kitchen table while families crowded close enough to touch shoulders. Arms, hair, anything that proved the missing men were real. Nico ate slowly because of his ribs. Rose hovered until he told her she was making him nervous. Excellent, she said. Consider it repayment. Dante stood at the edge of the room. He had been awake almost 30 hours. Nobody was looking at him now. They were looking at wives, mothers, friends, at Rose, moving from chair to chair, at Antonio warming more bread. The operation had brought the men back. But this was the part no operation manual contained. What happened after people returned, frightened, bruised, and alive? Rose knew what to do with that space. She filled it with food and permission to stop being soldiers for a while. Dante found her alone in the pantry after 2 in the morning. Rose had finally escaped because everyone was safe enough for her hands to start shaking. She sat on an overturned crate with her elbows on her knees. Dante closed the door behind him. Nico is fine. I know. The doctor wants him observed overnight. I know. Rose. She looked up. I know. Dante crouched in front of her. For once, he did not offer a solution. Rose stared at his face and whispered, I hated those bowls. I know. Every time I looked at them, I thought maybe I was being stupid. You weren't. You don't know that. No. His honesty loosened something in her chest. I kept thinking about his mother. She said, I told her he wasn't being abandoned. and I had no idea if that meant anything. Dante's hands rested loosely between his knees. It meant something to her. How do you know? She called me after she spoke to you. She said it was the first time all day she believed someone remembered Nico was a person and not an asset. Rose looked away. Dante's voice lowered. I remembered. I know, but I didn't know how to make her feel it. Rose's eyes returned to his. You brought him home, and you gave him somewhere to come home to. Neither moved. Dante was close enough that Rose could see the exhaustion beneath his eyes, the faint scar near his jaw. The rain dried at the collar of his shirt. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth, then returned to her eyes. Rose felt the shift and did not retreat. Dante lifted one hand slowly. This time he did not stop halfway. His fingers touched her cheek. Warm and careful. Rose leaned into his palm before she could overthink it. Dante, she whispered. A radio crackled beyond the pantry door. Both of them closed their eyes. Rose let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Your empire has terrible timing. My empire is beginning to irritate me. Beginning, his thumb moved once along her cheek. Then he stood and offered her his hand. Rose took it. They returned to the kitchen without mentioning what almost happened. The relief lasted less than a day. By Tuesday evening, Dante had confirmation that the abduction had been designed to pull his search teams away from the city, while Rossi men mapped the mansion's outer security. It was not yet an attack, but it was preparation for one. The difference mattered tactically, and not at all emotionally. Dante increased perimeter guards, changed routes, and ordered non-essential personnel off the property. Then he found Rose in the kitchen packing containers for the remaining families and said, You're leaving tonight. Rose did not look up. No, Rose, we're Bellini property. Your uncle's house has security, and the family's here. They'll be moved. Where Dante's silence answered. Rose closed the container. You don't have locations for all of them yet. I will. Then I'm staying until you do. No. Rose looked at him. Do not turn fear into an order because it's easier than telling me you're afraid. Dante's jaw tightened. They mapped this house. I heard. If Rossi decides to make a point, then protect it. That is what I'm trying to do by removing you. I am not the only person here. You are my wife. And Elena is Thomas's wife. Anna is Luisa's wife. There are children upstairs whose fathers are on your perimeter right now. You want me to walk past them, get into an armored car, and leave, because my marriage makes me more valuable. To me. Yes. The answer came so quickly Rose stopped. Dante did too. The kitchen went quiet around them. He took a breath. To me. You are. Rose's anger softened but did not disappear. Then listen to me. You brought their husbands home for me. I'm not leaving their wives behind for you. Dante looked at her for a long time. The old version of him would have ended the discussion. More guards. Akar. An order. He could still do it. Rose saw him consider it and choose differently. What do you need? He asked. Rose exhaled. Keep this house safe. Dante nodded once. Done. I need everyone inside to know exactly where to go if something happens. Not 10 pages of security language. One clear instruction. Marco can handle it. Good. I need the children kept away from the front rooms. Done. I need Antonio, Teresa, and 2 staff with me. Everyone else who can leave should leave. Agreed. And Dante, what you eat before you go back outside? He stared at her. Rose folded her arms. This negotiation is over if you become difficult. For the first time in hours, his mouth curved. You negotiate like a criminal. Bad influence. He sat at the island. By midnight, the mansion was quieter than Rose had ever known it. Most staff were gone. The families who remained had been moved to interior rooms near the kitchen, away from windows. Children slept on blankets and couches. Marco had explained the emergency plan in under 3 minutes because Rose had threatened to rewrite it herself if he used the phrase secondary defensive corridor one more time. Antonio kept coffee warm. Teresa organized medications. Rose made food because there was nothing else useful for her hands to do. Outside, Dante's men held the perimeter. Every few minutes, a radio murmured. Every time it did, the room paused. At 1:30, the lights flickered. Every adult looked up. They came back immediately. Marco's voice sounded over the radio at Rose's side. "Generator test. We're good." Rose released a breath. A little girl named Sophia, not Dante's niece. Just Benny's youngest, appeared beside her in pajamas. Mama Rose crouched. "Yeah, sweetheart. Are bad people coming?" The room went still. Rose could have lied. Instead, she said, "Some people might try to scare us tonight. Are you scared?" Rose looked toward the dark windows. "Yes." Sophia's eyes widened. Rose continued, "Being scared doesn't mean we don't know what to do. Your dad is outside. Mr. Dante is outside. Marco is right there. And you're staying with me." Sophia considered this. "Can I have a cookie?" Rose smiled. "That is an excellent emergency plan." She gave the child a cookie. Then every other child wanted one. Within 5 minutes, the most heavily guarded mafia mansion in the city was conducting an emergency cookie distribution. Antonio looked at Rose. "This is your tactical contribution. Morale. Too much sugar. You sound jealous. I made the cookies. Then accept your medal." A sharp burst of radio traffic cut through the room. Marco's hand went to his earpiece. Rose saw his face change. "Movement. East perimeter." The kitchen fell silent. Marco raised one hand. Nobody moved. Another voice came through. Then another. Rose could not understand the codes. She watched Marco. 2 vehicles stopped outside the east approach. He said, "Nobody leaves this room." Rose nodded. "Dante, outside." Her stomach tightened. Marco looked at her. "He knows." That did not help. Minutes stretched. No gunfire came. That was somehow worse. Rose kept the children away from the windows. Teresa sat with Elena. Antonio stood beside the stove, holding a ladle like a weapon, which would have been funny under any other circumstances. Then 3 distant cracks split the night. Gunshots. A child screamed. Rose's heart slammed against her ribs. She did not run toward the sound. She did not pretend she could help Dante by becoming another person he had to protect. She sat on the floor with the children. "Eyes on me." Sophia was crying. Rose held out both hands. "Remember the cookies?" The little girl nodded. "Antonio made them." Antonio looked offended by the irrelevance. Rose continued, "And tomorrow, I'm going to make pancakes. But only if everyone stays right here and helps me decide whether chocolate chips belong in them." One boy said, "Yes." Another said, "Blueberries." "Wrong." Sophia whispered through tears. The children began arguing. Rose let them. Outside, another shot sounded. Inside, the argument over pancakes became fiercely important. 15 minutes later, Marco's radio crackled. He listened. His shoulders lowered. Clear. Nobody cheered immediately. They had been holding themselves too tightly. Rose stood. Dante Marco touched his earpiece again. "Coming in." The kitchen door opened less than 2 minutes later. Dante walked through. Blood marked the shoulder of his shirt. Rose stopped breathing. He saw her. "It's not mine." She crossed the room anyway. "Everybody says that in this family." "It actually isn't." Rose touched his face. Then his chest. Then his arms, as if her hands needed independent verification. Dante caught them gently. "I'm fine." "What happened?" "Rossi sent men to test the perimeter. We stopped them." Anyone hurt two of ours? Minor. One needs stitches. Rose nodded. Only then did she realize the entire kitchen was watching. Dante seemed not to care. His hands remained around hers. You stayed where you were supposed to. Rose raised an eyebrow. Do not sound surprised. I'm impressed. I am capable of following sensible instructions. Good to know. Behind them, Sophia whispered loudly. Is that Mama Rose's husband? Silence. Then Nico, who had absolutely no business being out of bed, but had appeared in the hall wearing a medical brace, answered. Yeah. Dante slowly turned. Nico grinned. Mostly. The room broke. Laughter moved through it. Shaky and relieved. Rose covered her face. Dante looked at Nico. You were ordered to rest. I got hungry. Of course you did. Nico pointed toward Rose. Mama said nobody skips meals. Rose lowered her hands. I did not authorize you to weaponize that. Dante looked around the kitchen, children with cookie crumbs on their pajamas. Wives holding coffee. Antonio guarding a pot. Marco finally sitting. Nico bruised but alive. And Rose in the center of all of it. His house had been threatened. His men had defended it. But while he was outside keeping danger from crossing the walls, Rose had done something he was only beginning to understand. She had kept fear from owning everything inside them. Dante looked at his wife. Rose. What? He glanced at the untouched plate she had left for him before the shooting started. She followed his gaze. You're hungry. I'm starving. Rose smiled. Sit down and eat. Dante sat. And this time, when someone at the table murmured, Listen to Mama, Rose. He did not threaten anyone. He simply picked up his fork. The morning after the attack on the mansion, Dante Valenti discovered that being shot at was less exhausting than arguing with his wife about breakfast. Rose stood at the kitchen island, with her arms folded while he attempted to leave with coffee and nothing else. His shoulder was not injured, despite the blood she had seen the night before. But a bullet had grazed Marco's upper arm, and one guard had needed 6 stitches. Dante himself had acquired a shallow cut across his knuckles and approximately 2 hours of sleep. In his opinion, this qualified as functional. Rose disagreed. Sit. Dante looked toward the door. I have a meeting. Your meeting can survive eggs. Rossi will not. Then Rossi can wait until you finish chewing. Nico, installed at the far end of the table, under strict orders to rest his ribs, lowered his face into his coffee to hide a smile. Dante noticed. You have something to contribute. Nico immediately shook his head. No, boss. Rose put a plate in front of Dante. Good. Eat. Dante sat, because he had learned there were battles worth fighting and battles that only delayed breakfast. Rose turned toward the stove. Nico whispered. Mama got him. Dante looked at him. Nico became deeply interested in toast. The attack had failed, but it ended the illusion that the Rossi conflict could be contained through pressure and negotiation. Dante spent the next 48 hours dismantling the threat with the same cold efficiency that had built his reputation. Rose did not ask him for details he would not give, and Dante did not insult her with comforting lies. He told her when he was leaving, whether the mansion was safe, and when he expected to return. She told him which families were staying, who needed hospital transport, and which men had been awake too long to be useful. Their worlds did not become identical. They began fitting together. When Dante needed 20 men, moved before dawn, Rose had coffee and food packed before the cars arrived. When Rose told him Sal's blood sugar had dropped during a night shift, Dante changed the rotation rather than simply ordering Sal to be tougher. When Antonio complained that armed guards were blocking the pantry, Dante moved them. When Marco tried to argue that the pantry had a useful line of sight, Rose handed him a sack of potatoes and told him to establish a defensive position somewhere else. On the third evening, Dante came home before midnight. That alone told Rose something had changed. He entered the kitchen, loosened his tie, and sat without being told. Rose was making bread with Antonio, her forearms dusted with flour. "Well?" she asked. Dante looked at Antonio. Antonio understood. He took the dough to the far counter. Loudly announcing that he was not listening, Dante said, "Rossi asked for terms." Rose's hands stopped. "Is it over?" "Not yet, but it will be." How many more people get hurt before will be becomes is? Dante did not bristle. A month earlier, he might have, if I handle it correctly. None. Rose studied him. "And if they break the agreement, then I handle that." She nodded, because she knew there were edges of his life she could not soften by pretending they did not exist. "Okay." Dante looked at the bowl beside her. "What are you making bread for tomorrow?" "What happens tomorrow?" Rose smiled faintly. "People eat." Tomorrow became the first full meal the mansion had hosted since the attack. Not a celebration, Rose insisted, because 2 men were still in the hospital and nobody needed to pretend fear disappeared because the immediate danger had passed. It was simply dinner. Families came. Guards rotated through. Drivers ate between shifts. Children occupied the long table before adults could claim it. Antonio cooked enough meat to offend several dietary organizations. Rose made bread, pasta, vegetables, soap, and 3 desserts, because Teresa accused her of overcompensating, and Rose agreed. Dante arrived late from the final meeting with Rossi representatives. He paused in the doorway to the kitchen. Nobody immediately noticed him. That was unusual. His presence normally altered a room. Tonight, the room already had a center. Rose stood beside the stove with Sophia perched on a chair near her, both of them arguing over whether chocolate belonged in cannoli. Nico was carrying plates, despite being told not to. Marco had somehow been recruited to peel garlic. Carlo was warning a child not to touch his expensive watch, while simultaneously allowing the child to cover his wrist in stickers. Elena and Tomas sat together near the window. Tomas pale but recovering. Sal was eating something that Rose had clearly approved, because the portion contained more vegetables than he would have selected voluntarily. Above the refrigerator, the original night shift eat note remained taped beneath several additions. Someone had drawn a crown over Mama Rose. Someone else had crossed it out and drawn a wooden spoon. Dante stood there longer than necessary. Rose finally saw him. Her face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. "Hey." 1 word. "Home." Dante crossed the room. Rose looked him over automatically. "You're intact." "I made an effort." "Successful, yes." Rossi finished. The room gradually quieted. Dante turned. Nearly everyone was watching him now. He understood what they were waiting for. "The agreement holds," he said. "Routes reopen tomorrow. No retaliation unless authorized. The threat to the house is over." Relief moved through the room in a long exhale. Then Mickey raised a glass. "To the boss." Others followed. Dante lifted a hand. "Sit down." Mickey hesitated. Dante looked toward Rose. To Mama Rose. Rose's mouth fell open. The kitchen erupted. Glasses lifted. "Mama Rose." Rose covered her face. Dante smiled. She pointed at him through her fingers. "You did this." "I believe Nico did." Nico raised his glass. "Founder. Traitor." "To Mama," someone shouted again. Dante watched Rose laugh despite herself. This time she did not threaten anyone with a spoon. The nickname had completed its transformation. It had started as an exhausted joke from a frightened 22-year-old. Now it was gratitude, belonging, a name for the woman who remembered the people an empire could too easily reduce to positions, salaries, And numbers. Dante had thought leadership meant standing where everyone could see him. Rose had somehow become important by noticing people when nobody else was looking. Later, after families left and the children were carried upstairs asleep, the kitchen slowly emptied. Antonio threatened bodily harm against anyone who attempted to help him clean incorrectly. Teresa dragged him away before the threat could become policy. Marco took the final security report. Nico was driven home under supervision. By 1 a.m, Rose stood alone at the sink with her shoes kicked beneath a chair. Dante entered carrying 2 glasses of water. Antonio said, "If I touch anything, he'll resign." Rose accepted a glass. "He says that twice a week. I believe him every time. That's why he likes you." Dante leaned against the counter. For a while, neither spoke. The kitchen looked tired. Plates stacked beside the sink. Flour on the island. A forgotten napkin beneath a chair. The smell of garlic and bread remained in the air. Rose looked at him. "So it's really over. The immediate conflict is..." That is an extremely Dante answer. It is an accurate answer. "I'll take it." He nodded. Rose drank water. Dante watched her. "What I owe you, another apology." Rose lowered the glass. "This marriage is becoming historic. Do you want it or not? I want to enjoy the moment." Dante almost smiled. Then he became serious. "When we married, I thought taking care of you meant making sure you never had to do anything." Rose listened. "I gave you staff, security, money, drivers, whatever I thought you might need." He looked around the kitchen. "I thought that was generosity." It was, in its way. It was also convenient. Rose's eyebrows lifted. "For whom me?" That answer surprised her. Dante continued. "If everything you needed could be purchased or assigned to someone else, then I never had to ask what you needed from me." Rose went very still. Dante's gaze remained on her. "I thought I was giving you freedom. Mostly. I was avoiding the possibility that you might ask for something I didn't know how to give." The room felt smaller. Rose set her glass down. "And what do you think I need?" "I don't know." She blinked. Dante stepped closer. "But I want you to tell me." Rose looked at him for a long moment. Then she laughed softly. Not because anything was funny, but because the truth had found an inconvenient place to land. "You know why I never corrected you about the cooking? Because you enjoyed making me look stupid. That became a benefit." "Rose." She smiled, then let it fade. "Because you had already decided what I was." Dante's expression changed. "Your wife. Bellini daughter. Protected. Comfortable. Not useful to the ugly parts of your life. I never thought you were useless." "No. You thought I shouldn't have to be useful." He considered that. "Yes. And part of me liked it." Dante frowned. Rose looked toward the stove. "People have opinions about women who look like me." His face hardened immediately. "Rose. Not you." She stopped him with one hand. "You never made me feel ashamed of my body. I know that. But other people do. They see a chubby woman and decide things. Soft. Indulgent. Lazy. Maternal. Harmless. Sometimes I correct them. Sometimes I let them be wrong because being underestimated can feel safer than being known." Dante said nothing. Rose's voice lowered. "With you, I let it happen too long. Why? Because if you only expected me to be comfortable, I couldn't disappoint you." Dante stared at her. Rose looked down at her hands. "I know how ridiculous that sounds." "It doesn't." She looked up. "I married a man I barely knew. A man everyone is afraid of. You were polite to me. Generous. You never criticized my body. You never demanded I become some elegant mafia queen. And I thought maybe that was enough. Was it?" "No." The word was quiet. Dante absorbed it without flinching. "What do you want?" Rose's eyes stung. She hated that. She laughed once and wiped beneath one eye. I want my husband. Dante stopped breathing for a second. Not the driver you send. Not the chef. Not the security detail. Not a new coat because I said I was cold. You. He moved closer. Rose continued before courage failed. I want you to come home because you want dinner with me. I want you to tell me when you're afraid, instead of turning it into an order. I want you to ask, before deciding what I can handle. I want to know who you are when nobody needs the boss. Dante was directly in front of her now. And if you don't like who that is, Rose looked into his eyes, then at least I'll know my husband. His hand rose. Paused. Rose noticed. Are you asking? Yes. She smiled. Good. Dante touched her cheek. This time, there was no radio. No gunfire. No Nico yelling from a hallway. Rose leaned into his palm. Dante bent toward her. The kitchen door opened. Boss. I forgot my Nico stopped. Dante closed his eyes. Rose stared at the ceiling. Nico stood frozen in the doorway. His medical brace was visible beneath his jacket. I can leave. Dante opened his eyes. You can die. Also an option. Rose started laughing. Dante looked betrayed. This is not funny. It is a little funny. Nico backed toward the door. I saw nothing. You saw your own funeral. Good night. Mama Rose. Nico. The door slammed. Rose laughed harder. Dante looked toward the ceiling, as though requesting patience from a god who had clearly abandoned him. Your empire. Rose said. My empire is getting reassigned to Antarctica. Do you have operations there? I'll create them. Rose reached for his tie and pulled him back toward her. Where were we? Dante looked at her hand around his tie. His expression changed. Rose. Yes. Are you asking? She smiled. No. Then she kissed him. For a man famous for control, Dante lost it with impressive speed. His hands found her waist, careful for half a heartbeat, before Rose moved closer and made caution unnecessary. The kiss deepened. Rose felt him smile against her mouth when her back met the island. When they finally separated, both were breathing differently. Dante rested his forehead against hers. I should have asked who you were. Rose's fingers remained curled in his shirt. You can start now. What is your favorite color? She blinked. That is your opening question. I'm new at this. Green. Favorite flower? Peonies. I've sent you rose. Repeatedly. You never said anything. They were beautiful. But not your favorite. No. Dante looked offended by himself. Rose laughed. See, terrible husband. I can improve. I'm taking notes. He kissed her again. The next morning, Dante entered the kitchen at 7, wearing an apron. Rose stopped halfway through, pouring coffee. Antonio stopped halfway through, swearing at a delivery invoice. Nico, who had apparently survived the night, was eating breakfast at the table. Everyone stared. Dante ignored them. Rose pointed. What is that? An apron. I recognize the object. Why is it on you, I'm learning? Antonio made a sound of alarm. No. Dante looked at him. Antonio pointed toward the door. Absolutely not. This is my house. This is my kitchen. Rose covered her mouth. Dante looked at his wife. You said you wanted me. I do. You said you wanted me to take care of you. I did. I am learning to cook. Rose looked at Antonio. Antonio looked ready to call security against security's employer. Nico whispered, This is going to be incredible. Rose slowly put down the coffee pot. What can you make? Dante considered. Espresso. That is not cooking. Toast. Rose stared at him. Nico choked. Dante's mouth twitched. Rose walked to the refrigerator, removed eggs, and put them on the counter. Start small. He recognized the words. So this is revenge. This is marriage. Antonio surrendered with the expression of a general abandoning a city. For the next 20 minutes, Rose taught Dante Valenti how to scramble eggs. He overmixed them. He used too much heat. He attempted to argue that a larger flame should cook them more efficiently. Rose removed the pan from his hand. Cooking is not an intimidation tactic. Most things are. Not eggs. Antonio muttered. Barbarian. Dante ignored him. His second attempt was better. Not good. Better. Rose tasted it. Dante watched her. Well, she chewed thoughtfully. Nico leaned forward. Antonio crossed himself. Rose swallowed. Edible. Dante looked insulted. I run a multinational organization. And today, you made edible eggs. Your standards are unreasonable. Rose kissed his cheek. Thank you. That shut him up. Nizzo staret. Antonio stared. Dante stared at Rose. She took another bite. The eggs were slightly rubbery. She ate them anyway. 3 months later, the long table in the Valenti kitchen had become permanent. Dante had objected to replacing the smaller table until Rose pointed out that men were eating on crates in the hallway. He approved the new table the same afternoon and then claimed the decision was operational. Nobody believed him. Sunday dinner became a tradition, not mandatory. That was Rose's rule. No rank at the table. No business discussions unless necessary. Weapons stayed with security or out of sight. Children ate first if they were hungry. Anyone working the night shift could take food without asking. Antonio insisted these were not rules. They were kitchen standards. Rose let him have the distinction. The Rossi conflict faded into history the way violent problems in Dante's world often did, leaving scars. New precautions. And names nobody forgot. Nico recovered fully. Tomas returned to work on reduced hours. Sal stopped pretending coffee counted as breakfast. Mickey continued stealing food and was repeatedly caught. Rose did not become involved in Dante's criminal decisions. She did not sit in strategy meetings. She did not command crews. She did not become a queen because she had never wanted a throne. She became something the organization understood differently. When someone was injured, food appeared. When a baby was born, food appeared. When a father died, food appeared. When someone came home from prison, food appeared. When someone got married, Rose demanded to know the menu 6 months in advance. The kitchen became neutral territory. Men who could not admit fear in front of their crews sometimes sat there at 2 a.m. and ate soup. Rose did not ask questions unless they wanted to answer. The words on the refrigerator changed too. The old night shift eat note eventually became stained beyond recognition. Dante replaced it with a small wooden sign. If you're hungry, eat. Rose found it one morning. She touched the carved letters. Dante stood behind her. You did this, yes. You could have written it on paper. It would get dirty. It's a kitchen. Exactly. Rose turned. He was holding a grocery bag. What is that? Peonies. Her heart did something embarrassing. You bought flowers in a grocery bag. The florist was closed. Rose looked inside. Peonies. Not roses. She smiled. You remembered. Dante frowned. Of course I remembered. That was the point. 6 months after the night, 23 hungry men had first watched Rose cook. A new recruit named Ethan arrived at the mansion for Sunday security rotation. He was young enough to look nervous around everyone, especially Dante. He entered through the kitchen because Nico told him to report there. Rose was standing at the stove, tasting sauce. Dante sat at the table peeling garlic badly. Ethan stopped. He looked at Rose. Then Dante. Then Nico. Who's she? Nico stared at him. You're kidding. I'm new. That's Mama Rose. Ethan lowered his voice. The boss's wife, yeah. Across the kitchen, Rose pointed her spoon at Mickey. I saw that. Mickey froze, with a meatball halfway to his mouth. It was falling. It was in the tray. Toward me. Put it back. That feels unsanitary. Then eat it, and stop stealing. Mickey ate it. Rose shook her head. Ethan watched in disbelief. Nico leaned closer. But around here, he nodded toward Dante, who had finally managed to peel one intact garlic clove. He's Mama Rose's husband. Dante looked up. Nico. Nico immediately stepped behind Ethan. See? Terrifying. Rose laughed. Dante's expression softened when he looked at her. It still surprised people who knew him only as the boss. It no longer surprised Rose. That evening, after everyone left, Dante found her alone at the long table with a cup of tea. He sat beside her instead of at the head. Rose noticed. She always noticed. Tired? He asked. Happy? Different thing. Sometimes. Dante took her hand. Rose looked toward the kitchen. There were dishes waiting. Leftover bread. A child's drawing stuck to the refrigerator. The wooden sign above it. A container marked night shift. Nothing about the room looked like an empire. That was why she loved it. Dante followed her gaze. When we married, I thought this house already had everything. It had 12 bathrooms. 14. Obscene. It had security. It had Antonio. More frightening than security. From somewhere upstairs, Antonio shouted. I heard that Rose laughed. Dante squeezed her hand. What was missing? She asked. He looked at her. You. Rose's smile softened. That was smooth. I practiced. I can tell. Dante kissed her knuckles. Rose leaned against his shoulder. He had built his empire with money, discipline, fear, and loyalty. Those things still existed. Rose had never tried to replace them. She had only opened a kitchen door and asked hungry people to sit down. Somewhere along the way, soldiers became men again. Guards became fathers and husbands. Wives stopped feeling like visitors. Children learned which drawer held the cookies. A frightened young soldier gave Rose a ridiculous nickname, and an entire empire decided it fit. Dante could make people obey him. Rose had learned something different. People stayed where they felt remembered, and sometimes the heart of an empire was not the man sitting at the head of the table. Sometimes it was the chubby woman standing beside the stove, wooden spoon in hand, asking the most important question anyone in that house had learned to answer honestly. Have you